in the suffocating darkness of Kirikiri holding cell, where justice goes to die, and innocence learns the bitter taste of iron bars, Michael's whispered prayers competed with the mocking rhythm of his own song, bleeding through a guard's radio like salt poured into fresh wounds. The concrete walls wept with the humidity of Lagos rain, each drop a tear shed for dreams that had been murdered in their moment of birth. Michael sat on the narrow bench that served as both seat and bed, his festival clothes now stained with the fingerprint ink of accusation. His mind replaying the nightmare that had transformed triumph into tragedy in the span of a heartbeat. The song that was supposed to be his liberation had become his chain. Each note he had crafted with love, now twisted into evidence of a crime he had never committed. Through the barred window, Lagos paused with his internal rhythm, while Maki remained trapped in a cell that smelt of desperation and disinfectant. Other inmates moved around him like ghosts, their stories written in the language of broken dreams and systemic failures. "First time?" asked a man whose eyes carried the wisdom of someone who had learned to navigate injustice like a familiar neighborhood. Michael nodded, unable to trust his voice with words that felt too large for his throat. The radio continued his cruel serenade, playing window dreams between commercial breaks for products he would never be able to purchase. Each replay was a dagger to his heart, hearing his own voice singing about hope while handcuffed to a reality that had stripped hope away like clothing from a corpse. The irony tasted bitter lampan wine left too long in the sun. His breakthrough song had become the soundtrack of his breakdown, his artistic freedom buried alive in legal accusations that he couldn't understand, let alone fight. As Lagos night settled over the city like a blanket of stars he couldn't see, Michael pressed his face against the cool bars and whispered the same prayer his mother had taught him as a child. "God, if this is the storm, please show me the rainbow." But in the darkness of Kirikiri, surrounded by the echoes of his stolen song, even prayer felt like another luxury he could no longer afford. Michael's voice cracked like breaking glass as he proclaimed his innocence to walls that had heard 10,000 denials, while outside his cell window, evidence mounted against him like storm clouds gathering for a hurricane that would wash away everything he had ever built from the wreckage of poverty. The interrogation room felt smaller than the classroom windows he used to peer through, its fluorescent lights humming with the mechanical indifference of a system designed to process guilt rather than discover truth. Detective Adebayo, no relation to his beloved teacher, spread documents across the metal table like tarot cards predicting doom. Timestamps showing the disputed song's registration date, audio analysis reports, witness statements from studio employees who claimed to have heard the melody months before Michael's festival performance. "The evidence is overwhelming, young man." The detective's voice carried the wary authority of someone who had stopped believing in innocence years ago. "Producer Emeka Okoro registered this composition with Season 6 months before your performance. We have studio logs, session recordings, multiple witnesses placing the creation of this song firmly in Mr. Okoro's possession long before you allegedly wrote it." Michael's hands trembled as he examined papers that made no sense, legal documents written in the foreign language of copyright law and intellectual property rights. Each page was a nail in the coffin of his reputation. Each witness statement another shovel of dirt thrown over his dreams. The beautiful irony was that his education, the same knowledge Richard Cole had helped him access, now enabled him to understand exactly how thoroughly he was being destroyed by lies dressed as evidence. "I wrote that song in the Cole Mansion library. Paul was there. He heard me compose it. He has recordings of our study sessions where I was working on the melody." But even as he spoke, he could see the detective's expression, the practiced skepticism of someone who had heard alibis from princes and paupers, who had learned to treat every protest of innocence as just another performance in the theater of criminal justice. The recording of his song played again from the detective's phone. Each note, a mockery of the joy he had felt creating it. The melody that had been born from his dreams of education, his gratitude for friendship, his love for his mother's recovery, now served as evidence in the prosecution of his character. In that sterile room where truth and lies wore identical uniforms, Michael began to understand that sometimes justice is not about what actually happened, but which story the system finds easier to believe. Like vultures circling a wounded gazelle, Lagos entertainment executives gathered in air-conditioned boardrooms to dissect Michael's downfall, while their platinum-plated contracts gleamed with the hunger of predators who had found their perfect prey bleeding in legal quicksand. The Echo Hotel's conference room buzzed with the kind of energy that only feeds on fresh scandal. Industry titans who had ignored Michael when he was nobody now spoke his name with the fascinated horror of people watching a car crash in slow motion. His viral arrest had become more valuable than his music, transforming his tragedy into their opportunity as record labels calculated profit margins from controversy. Public sympathy is worth millions in this market, declared Stella Okafor, CEO of Afrobeat Global. Her manicured fingers dancing across tablet screens showing Michael's streaming numbers, which had exploded exponentially since his arrest. Whether he's guilty or innocent is irrelevant. The narrative sells albums. Wronged artist or copyright thief, both stories have market value. Her words fell like acid rain on any remaining illusion that the music industry cared about justice more than profit. Emeka Okoro sat at the head of the table like a king holding court. His victory smelled sharp enough to cut glass as he basked in vindication that tasted sweeter than aged whiskey. The producer, who had been humiliated by his street boy's talent, now watched that same talent being devoured by the machine he controlled. The boy had skill, he admitted with false magnanimity, but skill without respect for intellectual property rights is just educated theft. The conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lagos Island, where Michael sat in a cell that probably cost less to maintain than the lawyer's hourly fees being discussed around the polished table. While they debated merchandising opportunities and documentary rights to his story, the young man whose music had started this feeding frenzy remained trapped in concrete and steel, watching his dreams being auctioned to the highest bidder. Legal contracts were drafted with the speed of sharks sensing blood, recording deals that will own his voice whether he was found guilty or innocent, publishing agreements that will claim ownership of songs he hadn't written yet, management contracts that will control his image while he rotted in legal limbo. The music industry had found its newest commodity, and like all commodities, Michael's value will be determined not by his humanity, but by his market potential. In the corporate cathedral where art became arithmetic, his downfall was being transformed into their profit, his pain converted into their gain through the dark alchemy that turns tragedy into revenue streams. Richard Cole stood at the crossroads of loyalty, like a man whose heart had been torn in half, each piece bleeding with the impossible mathematics of loving two sons equally, while watching them need different kinds of salvation that might require choosing between them. The billionaire's office had become a war room where crystal awards reflected the fluorescent glow of crisis management. His team of lawyers and PR specialists surrounding him like generals planning a campaign in a battle where victory for one side meant defeat for the other. Paul sat across from his father's desk, his eyes red with tears that carried the salt of helpless frustration, his phone clutched in his hands like a weapon he didn't know how to use. "Michael is innocent, Dad." Paul's voice cracked with the desperate certainty of someone who had witnessed creation, who had been present when art was born from nothing but melody and mathematics beneath an iroko tree. "I was there when he wrote that song. I recorded him composing it during our study sessions. I have timestamps, video evidence, everything." His words hung in the air like prayers offered to a God who might be deaf to the pleas of privileged boys defending street-smart brothers. The legal team exchanged glances that spoke volumes about the delicate politics of defending someone who wasn't technically family against accusations that could splash mud on the cold name. "Sir," the lead attorney's voice carried the calculated caution of someone billing $4,000 an hour. "Involving your son as a witness could complicate matters. The media might frame this as wealthy family protecting their pet project, which could backfire spectacularly." Richard Cole felt the weight of Solomon's burden, the terrible wisdom required to choose between two forms of love that shouldn't have to compete but now existed in mortal conflict. Michael, the boy who had saved Paul's academic life and earned his place in their family through merit and dedication, now needed salvation that could cost Paul his reputation, his future, his safety from media scrutiny that devoured young lives like termite-eating wooden foundations. The morning Lagos sun painted the windows in gold that felt more like fool's gold, as Richard Cole realized that sometimes being a father meant making choices that would haunt his sleep forever. His billions could buy the best lawyers, but they couldn't purchase the one thing Michael needed most, a simple truth that only Paul could provide. The question bleeding through his heart was whether love for one son justified risking the other, whether justice for Michael was worth potential destruction for Paul, whether a father's heart was large enough to save both boys, or if God's cruelest joke was forcing him to choose which dream he would sacrifice to protect the other. Paul's visit to the detention center became a communion of souls through iron bars, as their brotherhood sank stronger than the metal separating them, their bond refusing to speak the language of abandonment even when the world conspired to translate their friendship into tragedy. The visiting room at Kirikiri felt like a cathedral designed by demons, harsh lighting that made even innocent faces look guilty, plastic chairs bolted to floors that had heard so many tearful goodbyes, guards whose expressions suggested they had forgotten how to believe in redemption. Paul sat across from Michael, with the glass partition between them feeling thicker than the Atlantic Ocean, their conversation conducted through phones that carried more than words. They transmitted the weight of loyalty tested in fire. "They are trying to destroy you," Paul whispered into the receiver, his voice carrying the fury of someone watching injustice parade in the clothes of law and order. "But I have evidence, Michael. Everything we recorded during our study sessions, all the timestamps, the progression of the song from idea to finished composition. Your innocence has a soundtrack, and I'm going to make sure the whole world hears it." Michael's smile carried the sad wisdom of someone learning that truth doesn't always win just because it's true, that justice sometimes requires more than evidence. It demands power, influence, resources that most people can't purchase with anything except their dignity. "Paul, your father's already risking so much. If you testify, if you get involved publicly, the media will destroy your family's reputation. Don't let my nightmare become your funeral." The fluorescent lights hummed above them like mechanical prayers. As Paul leaned forward, his palm pressed against the glass that separated their walls. "You saved my life when you didn't even know my name. You transformed me from academic failure to someone who could dream about MIT. You think I'm going to abandon you now because some producer with connections wants to steal your music and destroy your future?" Their conversation continued for the full hour allowed by regulations. Two young men who had found brotherhood in the space between privilege and poverty, now discovering that true friendship isn't tested by prosperity but by adversity. When visiting time ended and they had to separate, Paul pressed his hand against the glass one more time, his eyes carrying the determination of someone who had decided that loyalty was worth any price the world wanted to charge. Walking away from the detention center, Paul felt the weight of decisions settling on his shoulders like graduation robes, heavy with responsibility, but beautiful in their significance. Michael had given him academic resurrection through patient tutoring beneath an iroko tree. Now Paul would return the favor through testimony that might cost him everything, except the one thing that mattered most: the knowledge that he had chosen love over safety, truth over convenience, brotherhood over the comfortable cowardice that money could purchase if he let it. Adoni Bakare entered the courtroom like dawn breaking over Lagos Lagoon, her briefcase containing not just legal documents, but the weapons needed to resurrect truth from its premature grave. Her presence transforming the sterile chamber of justice into a stage where miracles were about to perform their most dangerous dance. The human rights lawyer had built her reputation defending the defenseless, her victories carved from cases where hope appeared to have died, but justice refused to attend the funeral. At 35, Adoni carried herself with the elegant authority of someone who had learned to speak fluent in justice and translate it back into the universal language of human dignity. Her decision to represent Michael pro bono had sent shockwaves through Lagos legal circles like earthquake tremors announcing that tectonic plates were about to shift. "Your Honor," her voice rang through the courtroom with the clarity of church bells calling the faithful to worship. "What we witness here is not merely a case of disputed intellectual property,
but a systematic attempt to criminalize talent that dared to emerge from the wrong zip code. Her opening statement painted Michael not as defendant, but as victim. His arrest not as justice, but persecution disguised in legal clothing. She moved through the courtroom like a conductor orchestrating symphony, each gesture calculated to direct attention toward evidence that the prosecution preferred remain hidden in shadows. Her investigation had uncovered digital breadcrumbs that told stories more honest than human testimonies purchased with industry connections. Metadata timestamps that proved Michael's composition predated Okoro's registration. Cell phone records showing when and where inspiration had been captured. Study session recordings that documented artistic creation in real time. The courtroom atmosphere crackled with electricity as Adeyemi systematically dismantled the prosecution's case, like a master mechanic taking apart an engine to reveal its broken parts. Each piece of evidence was presented with the dramatic flair of someone who understood that justice was not just about law, but about theater. That convincing judges required more than facts. It demanded storytelling that made truth impossible to ignore. Emeka Okoro shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Adeyemi's presentation transformed him from victim to suspect, his claimed ownership of Michael's song beginning to look less like intellectual property protection and more like theft dressed in legal costumes. The producer who had expected easy victory was discovering that some young men have guardian angels who wear barrister wigs and carry briefcases full of evidence that refuses to lie quietly in filing cabinets. In the sacred space where law meets justice, Adeyemi Bakari was about to prove that truth, when properly armed with evidence and eloquence, could still defeat lies backed by money and influence. Like digital archaeologists excavating buried civilizations, forensic experts presented metadata evidence that told stories more honest than human tongues. Each timestamp and data fragment a witness testifying to Michael's innocence with the mathematical precision that lies could never duplicate or destroy. The courtroom's projection screen illuminated with the holy scripture of digital evidence as Dr. Olumide Fashola, Nigeria's foremost audio forensic expert, walked the court through the electronic DNA of musical creation. His analysis revealed the song's true birth certificate, file creation dates, audio fingerprints, compression patterns that traced window dreams to its actual origin in the Cole Mansion study room rather than Okoro's professional studio. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Fashola's voice carried the authority of someone who had learned to make computers confess their secrets. Digital audio files contain metadata more reliable than eyewitness testimony. This song was first recorded on Paul Cole's smartphone at 3:47 p.m. on March 15th during what appears to be a study session. The acoustic signature matches the Cole family library. High ceilings, hardwood floors, specific reverb patterns that are unique to that architectural space. The evidence mounted like sunrise over a landscape of lies. Paul's phone contains 17 different recordings of the song's evolution from hummed melody to finished composition, timestamps proving Michael had been developing the music weeks before Okoro's claimed creation date. WhatsApp messages between the boys discussed chord progressions, lyrical ideas, musical arrangements in conversations that predated the producer's copyright registration by 2 months. Adeyemi Bakari orchestrated the presentation like a master conductor, each piece of digital evidence building towards a crescendo of undeniable truth. Cell tower data placed Michael at the Cole Mansion during every recorded development of the song, while Okoro's phone showed he was in different locations entirely during the crucial creative periods. Bank records revealed suspicious payments from Okoro to witnesses who had claimed to hear him composing the disputed melody. The prosecution watched their carefully constructed case crumble like sandcastles before tide water as technology revealed truth that human deception couldn't corrupt. In the digital age, lies left footprints that computers could follow back to their source, and Michael's innocence was written in binary code that no amount of money could modify. The song that had been stolen was singing its own defense, each data point a note in the symphony of justice that was about to set its true creator free. As Lagos afternoon light streamed through courtroom windows, justice was finding its voice in the language that the modern world spoke most fluently, the honest mathematics of digital evidence that refused to lie even when humans had forgotten how to tell the truth. The courtroom gasped like a congregation receiving divine revelation as security footage from Okoro's own studio flickered across screens, showing the producer copying Michael's melody from a viral social media post, while his lawyers insisted he had created the song months earlier in the same room where his theft was now being exposed. The video evidence arrived like lightning splitting dark skies, delivered by a former studio engineer whose conscience finally overcame his fear of industry blacklisting. The timestamp burned across the screen like a brand of truth. April 3rd, 2:15 a.m., weeks after Michael's composition had gone viral on social media platforms. Okoro sat at his mixing board playing a phone video of Michael's performance while transcribing the melody note by note into his professional recording software. This is security camera footage from Mr. Okoro's own studio, Adoni Bakari announced with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had just watched justice remove its blindfold. Notice how he plays the viral video repeatedly, stopping and starting to capture the exact musical phrases, the precise chord progressions, even the vocal inflections that made Michael's original composition so distinctive. The courtroom erupted in murmurs that sounded like waves breaking against shoals of disbelief, as Okoro's face transformed from confident accusation to panic-stricken recognition of exposure. His legal team scrambled through documents with the desperate energy of people searching for lifeboats on a sinking ship. But the evidence was undeniable. Their client was not victim, but perpetrator. Not creator, but thief. Not wronged artist, but calculating predator who had attempted to devour a young man's dream.
Additional witnesses emerged like flowers blooming after rain. Studio employees who had seen Okoro watching Michael's viral videos obsessively. Sound engineers who remembered him saying, "I wish I had written that song." Industry insiders who recalled his jealous comments about street artists who didn't deserve their sudden fame. The testimony painted a picture of a man whose envy had metastasized into criminal conspiracy. Michael sat in the defendant's chair, watching his nightmare transform into vindication. Tears streaming down his face like rain after drought, as the truth finally emerged from its burial ground of lies and industry politics. The song that had been stolen was now stealing back its freedom. Each piece of evidence, a note in the symphony of justice that was about to restore his name, his reputation, and his right to claim ownership of dreams that had been born in his heart and nurtured in the fertile soil of friendship and gratitude. As Okoro's empire of deception collapsed like a house built on quicksand, the courtroom witnessed something rarer than rare earth metals, the moment when truth overcomes power, when justice defeats money, when a street-smart boy's integrity proves stronger than an industry titan's influence. The real thief had been revealed, and his crime was about to receive the judgment it had always deserved. Michael's bare feet touched Lagos pavements as a free man, while morning rain kissed his face like tears of gratitude from a sky that had been weeping for justice. The city's heartbeat welcoming him home with rhythms that sounded like redemption songs played by invisible orchestras. The courthouse steps became a stage for resurrection as media cameras flashed like lightning, illuminating a miracle in progress. Michael emerged from the building that had held his future hostage, his head raised toward clouds that were finally releasing the rain Lagos had been praying for through weeks of dry season heat. Each raindrop felt like absolution, washing away the stain of false accusation. Each breath of free air is symphony celebrating the mathematics of vindication. Paul waited at the bottom of the steps like an anchor in the storm of celebration, his smile brighter than all the camera flashes combined, as he wrapped his friend in an embrace that spoke volumes about loyalty, tested in fire and found unbreakable. "You are free," he whispered against Michael's ear, both of them crying tears that mixed rain and joy into saltwater sacraments of brotherhood that had survived the worst hell that lies could create. Adoni Bakari stood beside them, like a guardian angel who had traded wings for law books, her victory smile carrying the satisfaction of someone who had remembered justice, how to sing its own name. Behind her, Okoro was led away in handcuffs that clicked with the metallic rhythm of karma keeping perfect time. His empire of deception crumbling like sandcastles before waves of truth that refused to recede. The crowd that had gathered sang Michael's song, the same window dreams that had been stolen, but was now restored to its rightful owner. 300 voices creating a choir that made the courthouse steps sound like a cathedral celebrating resurrection. Street vendors offered him free pure water.
Taxi drivers honked their horns in celebration, and children from nearby schools pressed against police barriers to catch glimpses of the boy who had proven that dreams could survive even when buried alive in legal graveyards. As the rain intensified and the crowd dispersed, Michael stood alone for a moment in the cleansing downpour, feeling the weight of nightmare lift from his shoulders like chains being unlocked by divine locksmith. Freedom tasted like morning rain, clean and fresh and full of possibility, washing away the bitter aftertaste of injustice while preparing the ground for new growth. The boy who had learned through windows had walked through prison doors and emerged on the other side of fear, carrying with him the knowledge that truth, when properly defended, could indeed overcome any lie that money could purchase. Lagos pulsed around him with its eternal rhythm, and for the first time in months, Michael's heartbeat synchronized perfectly with his city's, both of them drumming the same song of hope that refused to be silenced. Recording studios opened their doors like churches welcoming a returning prophet, as Michael's voice, tempered by trial and refined by injustice, carried new depths that made angels weep, and industry executives remember why they had fallen in love with music before profit margins taught them to forget. The Chocolate City Music Studio in Victoria Island hummed with anticipation that felt electric. Sound engineers preparing equipment like altar servants preparing communion, as word spread through Lagos entertainment circles that Michael Adeyemi was ready to record his first post-vindication single. His ordeal had transformed him from promising young artist into symbol of artistic integrity, his story resonating across Nigeria like gospel for anyone who had ever had their dreams stolen by those with more power than conscience. The voice is different, whispered session guitarist Kunle Ade to the bassist during soundcheck. Both musicians recognizing the way suffering had seasoned Michael's vocal cords with flavors that comfortable voices never possessed. There's pain in there now, but also strength, like steel that's been through fire and come out stronger. His observation captured what everyone in the studio could hear, but couldn't quite articulate. Michael's talent had been refined by adversity into something precious and unbreakable. The new song emerged from Michael's heart like water from desert springs, told the story of dreams that refused to die even when buried under lies, melodies that soared above the hatred of those who would steal rather than create. His lyrics painted pictures of courthouse battles and prison cell prayers, of friendship that survived media storms and truth that emerged from legal graveyards, of justice delayed but never denied. Recording labels executives who had once ignored his demo tapes now competed like auctioneers at art galleries, their offers reflecting not just his talents but his marketing value as survivor of industry corruption. Yet Michael approached these negotiations with the wisdom of someone who had learned to recognize predators dressed as benefactors, his prison experience having taught him to read contracts with the careful attention of someone who understood that freedom, once lost, was too precious to risk again. As evening painted Lagos in watercolors of pink and gold, Michael's voice filled the studio with music that carried the weight of resurrection, each note a testimony that some dreams are fireproof, some talents are theft-proof, some spirits are break-proof. The boy who had risen from poverty through education, falling through false accusation, and risen again through vindication, was about to release music that would prove Phoenix mythology was not just metaphor, but mathematical certainty for those with courage to keep creating even when the world tried to convince them their wings had been permanently clipped. His ashes had become fertile soil for music more beautiful than anything he had created before the fire tried to consume him. Kemi Adebayo's voice blended with Michael's like honey meeting wine as their duet transformed the recording studio into a temple where two souls discovered that love sometimes arises disguised as musical collaboration, their harmonies creating frequencies that made even skeptical hearts remember why they had learned to beat. The collaboration had been suggested by Kemi's producer father, who recognized that Michael's post-trial fame and Kemi's rising R&B stardom could create commercial magic. But neither artist expected the electricity that sparked between them the moment their voices found each other in the sacred space between melody and rhythm. Kemi, 21 years old, with honey-colored skin and eyes that held music even when she wasn't singing, entered the studio like sunrise, gradual, then suddenly illuminating everything. She moved through music like a dancer through familiar choreography, her voice adapting to different styles while maintaining the distinctive honey-smooth quality that made producers fight for her time and attention. As Lagos traffic hummed its eternal lullaby beyond the studio windows, two artists who had started as collaborators began recognizing themselves in each other's eyes. Their music was teaching them about love, not the manufactured romance of commercial ballads, but the organic harmony that grows between hearts that speak the same artistic language. The studio was becoming their garden. Their songs, the flowers that proved love and music, were simply two names for the same divine force that transforms separate voices into unified symphonies that make the universe remember how to sing. Paparazzi swarmed around Michael and Kemi's blossoming romance like locusts consuming a harvest, their cameras clicking with the mechanical hunger of machines that fed on stolen moments, transforming private tenderness into public commodity with the efficiency of factories that manufactured gossip from genuine emotion. The first photographs appeared in Lagos Weekend with headlines that screamed in fonts designed to grab attention. Vindicated singer finds love with R&B princess. And Michael and Kemi, Nigeria's new power couple? The images showed them leaving a restaurant in Victoria Island, Kemi's hand resting lightly on Michael's arm, both of them laughing at something private that the world would now dissect like scientists examining specimens under microscopes. Social media exploded with the kind of frenzy that made Instagram algorithms wealthy and human privacy extinct. Their every public appearance became performance art, whether they intended it or not. Shopping trips to Palms Mall analyzed for relationship clues. Studio sessions interpreted as romantic rendezvous. Casual lunches with friends transformed into evidence of engagement rumors or pregnancy speculation. Michael Adeyemi's Cinderella story takes royal tone, read the Pulse Nigeria headline, accompanied by photos stolen from Kemi's social media accounts, showing her family's middle-class comfort contrasted with images of Michael's humble beginnings. The media had found their favorite narrative. Street boy rises from prison to claim princess. Fairy tale romance born from trial by fire. Love story that sold magazines because it combined all the elements their audience craved. The attention felt like sunshine that had become too hot to enjoy. What had become as beautiful artistic collaboration was being processed through the machinery of celebrity culture that transformed authentic connection into entertainment product. Their genuine affection was being repackaged as content for gossip blogs, their private jokes becoming headlines, their quiet moments together now requiring strategic planning to avoid telephone.
Anticipated every possible response. But I am informing you of reality. This child exists, will continue to exist, and deserves financial support from both parents. Think of it as an 18-year contract with more meaningful terms than any recording deal you will ever sign. Michael left the office building feeling like someone whose soul had been foreclosed upon, the weight of unborn responsibility crushing his shoulders as Lagos traffic moved around him with indifferent efficiency. The boy who had survived poverty through education, false accusations through evidence, media scrutiny through patience, now faced a challenge that no classroom had prepared him for, explaining to Kemi that their love story was about to be rewritten by the consequences of his faithlessness, that their harmony would now include discord that might prove impossible to resolve into anything resembling the beautiful music they had been creating together. The afternoon sun beat down on him like judgment as he realized that some mistakes don't just change your life, they hijack it completely, transforming every future plan into negotiation with past failures that refuse to remain buried in yesterday's shame. Kemi's tears fell like sacred rain as Michael's confession tore through their harmony like lightning, splitting perfect melodies. Each word he spoke becoming a blade that severed the songs they had woven together from hope and shared dreams that now lay bleeding in the silence between heartbeats. The conversation took place in Michael's apartment living room, the same space where they had written love songs that now felt like mockeries of what they thought they knew about forever. Kemi sat on the sofa where they had laughed over lyrics, her hands folded in her lap like broken wings, while Michael paced before windows that framed Lagos sunset in colors that seemed too beautiful for such devastating honesty. "I made a mistake," Michael began, his voice carrying the weight of confession that he knew would change everything between them. "One night, 6 weeks ago, with Folake Coker. It meant nothing. It was weakness and loneliness and champagne, but it happened. And now," his words trailed off into silence that felt heavier than the air conditioning could lift.
heavier than their love could bear. The moment stretched between them like eternity condensed into seconds that would replay in both their hearts for decades. Kemi's face transformed from confusion to understanding to devastation with the slow-motion clarity of dreams becoming nightmares. "She's pregnant," Kemi whispered, not as question, but as recognition of truth that her heart had already begun to process even as her mind rejected its possibility. The silence that followed was the sound of love being murdered by circumstance, of harmony being strangled by consequence, of forever being revealed as temporary contract that could be voided by human weakness and biological reality. Kemi's tears began falling with the steady rhythm of rain that knows it will continue until the sky empties itself of all the sorrow it had been carrying. "I love you," Michael said desperately, reaching toward her with hands that she pulled away from as if his touch might burn. What happened with her was mistake, stupidity, betrayal of everything we are. But this baby, innocent life that deserves father who takes responsibility. I don't know how to be faithful to you and dutiful to child who will exist because of my faithlessness." Kemi stood slowly, her movement carrying the grace of someone whose heart had just learned to break in public without making sound that might disturb neighbors who didn't need to hear love songs being replaced by funeral dirges. "You're right," she said, with voice that sounded like glass being carefully swept up after something precious had shattered. She walked toward the door with dignity that made Michael's heart ache more than anger would have, pausing only to look back with eyes that held all the music they would never make together. "I hope you will be a good father, Michael. You have so much love to give. I just wish you had given all of it to me before sharing it with someone else." The door closed behind her with finality that sounded like the last note of their symphony, leaving Michael alone with silence that would echo in his apartment long after her perfume faded from the air and her harmony disappeared from his life. Social media became a battlefield where lies matched dressed as truth, as anonymous accounts waged coordinated war against Michael's reputation with surgical precision, their campaign designed to destroy him systematically, while making the destruction look like organic public outrage against his moral failures. The first attack appeared on Instagram at midnight, grainy photos of Michael leaving Folake's hotel suite, images captured by telephoto lenses and timestamped to prove his infidelity occurred while the world believed he was faithful to Kemi. The caption read like prosecution opening statement: "Fraud singer cheats on girlfriend with industry predator. Michael Adeyemi's true character exposed." Within hours, the story metastasized across every social platform like digital cancer consuming his reputation cell by cell. Twitter hashtags, fake lover, and Michael the Cheat began trending, accompanied by memes that transformed his romantic ballads into jokes about hypocrisy. Facebook posts dissected his lyrics for evidence of deceptive personality, while TikTok videos used his songs as soundtrack for comedic sketches about unfaithful boyfriends. The coordination was too perfect to be organic. Accounts created recently, posting patterns that suggested professional social media management, language that carried the vocabulary of public relations warfare rather than genuine public outrage. Someone with resources and industry connections was orchestrating his destruction with military precision, using his private mistakes as weapons in a campaign designed to end his career permanently. Anonymous blogs published detailed exposés about his relationship with Folake, articles that contained information only someone with inside access could possess, hotel receipts, timeline details, private conversations that had somehow been recorded or reconstructed. The narrative being constructed painted him as calculating predator who had used his victim status to manipulate women. His courtroom vindication reframed as evidence that he was skilled liar rather than wronged artist. Kemi's social media accounts were flooded with sympathetic messages from fans who treated her like war victim, that support weaponized to increase pressure on Michael's crumbling public image. Photos of her looking sad were circulated with captions like "betrayed by the man she helped rebuild" and "another good woman destroyed by male selfishness." As Michael watched his reputation being systematically demolished, he recognized Folake's fingerprints on the destruction. The timing was too perfect, the access too detailed, the strategy too sophisticated to be random internet outrage. Someone with resources and industry connections was orchestrating his destruction with military precision, using his private mistakes as weapons in a campaign designed to end his career permanently. Anonymous blogs published detailed exposés about his relationship with Folake, articles that contained information only someone with inside access could possess, hotel receipts, timeline details, private conversations that has somehow been recorded or reconstructed. The narrative being constructed painted him as calculating predator who had used his victim status to manipulate women, his courtroom vindication reframed as evidence that he was a skilled liar rather than wronged artist. Kemi's social media accounts were flooded with sympathetic messages from fans who treated her like war victim, their support weaponized to increase pressure on Michael's crumbling public image. Photos of her looking sad were circulated with captions like "betrayed by the man she helped rebuild" and "another good woman destroyed by male selfishness." As Michael watched his reputation being systematically demolished, he recognized Folake's fingerprints on the destruction. The timing was too perfect, the access too detailed, the strategy too sophisticated to be random internet outrage. Someone with resources and industry connections was orchestrating his destruction with military precision, using his private mistakes as weapons in a campaign designed to end his career permanently. Kemi returned like dawn after the darkest night. As forgiveness fell over Michael like golden cloth, their reunion became testament that true love survives even in trials' aftermath, when hearts choose grace over grudges and healing over hatred that would poison both souls forever. The reconciliation began with a song, Kemi's voice floating through Michael's apartment at 3 a.m. as she stood outside his door, singing the harmony they had created together. Her melody carrying forgiveness that her spoken words hadn't yet learned to pronounce. Michael opened the door to find her rain-soaked and vulnerable, her eyes carrying sorrow mixed with determination that looked like love deciding to be stronger than pain. "I've been thinking," she said, as he wrapped her in towels that smelled like his loneliness, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had spent sleepless nights measuring love against pride and discovered which one weighed more in the mathematics of forever. "What you did was wrong, unforgivable by most standards, but love isn't most standards. Love is choosing to forgive the unforgivable when the alternative is losing something more valuable than perfect trust." They talked through the night like surgeons operating on their relationship's wounded heart, examining each heart with careful attention of people determined to heal rather than merely bandage what had been broken. Kemi's questions cut deep. Why Folake? Why White Knight? Why risk everything they had built for momentary weakness that provided nothing lasting? Michael's answers bled with honesty that tasted like medicine. His trauma from imprisonment, his hunger for validation, his fear that success was temporary illusion that might evaporate. "The baby changes everything," Kemi said as Lagos Dawn painted their conversation in watercolors of new beginning. "I won't pretend to be happy about sharing you with consequence of your betrayal, but I will also not pretend that love dies just because it gets complicated. If you are going to be father, I want to help you be a good one. If we're going to rebuild us, we rebuild stronger than before." Their agreement felt like marriage vows spoken in a living room rather than church, promises to choose each other daily despite evidence that humans were imperfect, commitment to create harmony from
the dedication to proving that some loves are fireproof when both people decide to walk through flames together rather than abandon each other to burn alone. As morning traffic began its internal Lagos symphony beyond the windows, Michael and Kemi sat together on the sofa where their relationship had almost died, their hands intertwined like prayers being answered through human determination to transform mistakes into lessons, betrayal into deeper understanding, broken trust into rebuilt foundation that would prove stronger than original innocence because it had been tested in fire and chose not to become ash. The social media storm continued raging outside their private peace. Anonymous accounts still attacking his reputation while the world waited to see if their love story would survive public scrutiny. But inside the apartment, where they had learned to harmonize despite discord, two people who understood that perfection was luxury they couldn't afford decided that imperfect love, honestly lived, was what's more than perfect love that existed only in imagination. The press conference became Michael's Golgotha as he faced the media's hungry mouths with naked honesty.
Each question a thorn pressed into his reputation, while every truthful answer became a step toward redemption's summit that could only be climbed by those brave enough to bleed publicly for private mistakes. The ballroom at Echo Hotels transformed into Colosseum, where reputation gladiators fought for survival. Camera flashes creating lightning storm atmosphere as journalists sharpened their questions like weapons designed to draw maximum blood from minimum wounds. Michael sat at the head table like defendant in trial, where public opinion would serve as both judge and jury. His fate depended on ability to transform private shame into public redemption. Let me be completely honest. Michael began, his voice carrying the steady strength of someone who had decided that truth, however painful, was preferable to lies that provide temporary shelter but permanent imprisonment. 6 weeks ago, I made a mistake that betrayed the woman I love, compromised my integrity, and created a child who deserves better than the circumstances of their conception. The admission sent ripples through the assembled media like earthquake tremors, reporters leaning forward with anticipation of predators sensing wounded prey. But Michael's strategy was counterintuitive. Instead of defensive deflection, he offered radical transparency that made attack difficult because he was attacking himself more harshly than any journalist could manage. I was seduced by someone who recognized my vulnerabilities and exploited them for purposes I'm still learning to understand. He continued, Folake's name unspoken but present felt in every word. My trauma from imprisonment, my gratitude for success, my hunger for validation, these were weaknesses that were weaponized against me. But explanation is not excuse. I chose betrayal. I accept consequences. I take full responsibility for pain I have caused. The questions came like arrows aimed at his heart. Why Folake? Why risk Kemi? Why claim victim status when he had made choices? Michael answered each one with honesty that felt like surgery performed without anesthesia. His responses revealed wounds while simultaneously beginning their healing through exposure to light that sterilized the infection of secrecy. Kemi sat in the front row like anchor in the storm, her presence providing stability that allowed him to speak truth without drowning in his weight. Their eyes met during particularly difficult questions, her smile offering forgiveness in real time, her nods providing encouragement that helped him continue climbing the mountain of public confession that led towards summit where reputation could be rebuilt from the ruins of honesty. As the press conference concluded, Michael felt exhausted but purified, like someone who had undergone surgery that was painful but necessary for survival. The media storm would continue, but he had removed their most powerful weapon, secrecy that allowed speculation to flourish. By speaking truth voluntarily, he had transformed himself from victim of circumstances into architect of his own redemption, proving that sometimes the only way to defeat lies is to tell truth so completely that falsehood has nowhere left to hide. The wedding day arrived painted in Lagos sunset colors as Michael and Kemi exchanged vows beneath the same iroko tree where his journey began, their love story completing its perfect circle, while Paul played piano and Adeyemi wiped tears of joy that tasted like answered prayers crystallized into liquid gratitude. The ancient tree stood witness to miracle of love that has survived betrayal, forgiveness that had conquered hurt, commitment that had grown stronger through testing rather than weaker through trial. Fairy lights wrapped around its massive trunk like stars brought down to earth, specially to illuminate this moment when two hearts chose forever, despite having every reason to choose goodbye instead. Michael stood at a makeshift altar wearing traditional agbada that his mother has sewn with threads of pride, the white fabric catching golden light as he watched Kemi approach through crowd of family and friends who had gathered to witness love's victory over every obstacle that had tried to separate them. She moved toward him like music made visible, her white gele crowned with gold jewelry that caught sunset rays and scattered them like blessings over gathered witnesses. Today, announced Pastor Adebayo, whose voice carried the authority of someone who had seen enough broken relationships to recognize miraculous healing when it stood before him. We celebrate not just union of two hearts, but testimony that love properly tended can survive any storm, grow stronger through any trial, bloom more beautifully after being pruned by difficulty. Their vows were songs spoken instead of song, promises that harmonize with the internal reading of the iroko tree's swaying branches. Michael's voice carried the weight of gratitude as he promised to choose Kemi daily, to honor her forgiveness through actions worthy of her grace, and to love her with the fierce dedication of someone who understood that second chances were gifts too precious to waste on anything less than complete devotion. Kemi's response rang like church bells announcing resurrection. I choose you not because you are perfect, but because your imperfections taught me that love is not feeling, but decision. Not emotion, but commitment. Not fairy tale, but daily choice to create beauty from whatever materials life provides. Her words transformed wedding into worship service, where human love became reflection of divine love that forgives endlessly and creates constantly. Paul's piano playing provides soundtrack for ceremony that felt like symphony reaching its crescendo. His music weaving together all the themes that had shaped their story. Friendship that transcended social boundaries, education that opened impossible doors, justice that emerged from darkness, forgiveness that transformed betrayal into deeper understanding, love that proved stronger than any obstacle, except surrender. As Lagos sun painted the sky in watercolors of pink and gold, as the iroko tree swayed its ancient blessing over their union, as family and friends sang traditional wedding songs that had celebrated love for generations, Michael and Kemi kissed with the passion of people who had learned that happily ever after wasn't a guarantee, but achievement earned through choosing each other repeatedly through every season that tested their commitment. The boy who once learned through windows had walked through prison doors, emerged from legal battles, survived media storms, accepted responsibility